Hi, I'm going to be talking about sleep. Why do you need to sleep? How much sleep do you really need? What are the symptoms and causes of insomnia? And what is considered sleep hygiene? One of my best resources is the National Sleep Foundation. They have this chart that shows how much sleep we're supposed to be getting. When we're newborn, 0 to 3, we're constantly sleeping. Then in infants, that starts to reduce, toddler, preschool, school age, teen, young adult, adult, and then older adult. Now, I know people probably looking at this newborn picture are going, well, it doesn't feel like they're sleeping. Sometimes they're awake and crying, but the reality is any person who knows and trying to get that newborn into a pattern, it's pretty powerful when you do, because then you start to get a sleep pattern developed. And heart goes out to those people as they start to get a sleep pattern with a newborn. But this sleep pattern continues for the rest of our lives. Now, it's interesting, a lot of times older adults, people think, oh, they're going to lose their sleep. They're not going to sleep as well. It's just part of getting older. And the answer is no. They need less sleep, but they still need to have 7 to 8 hours. And so does an adult. And so does a young adult. However, their sleep pattern, you'll notice, is long. And sometimes they have a later sleep pattern. So check out that chart. All right, what goes on when you sleep? You have a circadian rhythm, which is your internal clock. It's regulated by the pineal gland, which releases a hormone called melatonin, which induces drowsiness and sleep. But before all this happens, throughout the day, sleep pressure is building. So here you see the dotted line of your circadian rhythm. And this is your wake drive. This is what's bringing you through the day, keeping you awake, going to sleep. But you'll see that it goes up and down throughout the day. Your sleep drive, this is what pushes you into a sleep pattern, which then pushes you into melatonin. What builds up throughout the day is something called adenosine. And adenosine is an actual hormone that is building up. And then when it drops right there, this decreasing sleep pressure, when sleep reduces, it actually reduces this and drops it. And this is important because when this drops, that's when the melatonin starts to release. Why I keep emphasizing this is that you want this to build throughout the day. And later on, I'm going to be talking about caffeine. And I want to make sure that people understand that caffeine actually prohibits the production of adenosine, and you want it to build up in your system. You want adenosine to build up in your system so you can get this drop in your S drive, which starts your melatonin. So let's talk about just your brain structure. And I mentioned the pineal gland. This is regulated, and in your brain, the pineal gland releases melatonin, a hormone that elicits drowsiness and sleep. There it is right there. The pituitary gland, also regulated by your brain, the pituitary gland releases a growth hormone during sleep to help repair damaged body tissue. And this is where your recovery is. This is why sleep's important. It helps with the recovery process. Pons, located in the brain stem, is active during REM sleep. This is your rapid eye movement sleep, when it signals nerves in the spine to immobilize the body to prevent movement during your dreams. So this is important. This helps prevent sleepwalking. It prevents that happening. Now, when someone starts to have problems with this, you'll see that this could be really problematic for someone if they're not, during REM sleep, not immobilized. And then this is two teeny neural structures are located in the hypothalamus and function as the master biological clock. By the monitoring levels of light entering your eye and managing body temperature, hormone release, and metabolic rate, the SNC control falling asleep and awaking. Now, what I think is key is you'll hear often people say the best way to get over jet lag is to get sun, to be out in the sun, because it resets your internal clock. Your eye does play a really important job because it is bringing in the optic nerve to the hypothalamus, which is taking in that sunlight and sensing different changes in light levels. And I want to say that this is important too, because if you're getting a lot of screen time at night, if the light's not changing for your eye, you can actually be signaling to your body to stay awake. So knowing what light is on in your room and what is stimulating your eye before you go to bed is also really important. I mean, think about that. You need things to get dark at night. You need the room to get dark. You need to reduce the screen time, reduce the light in as you start to go into that sleep pattern. So, which of the hormones is charged with helping you to really get sleep in motion? Which one? Melatonin. And so you often will hear, and I did mention the S drive before, but this is the thing that creates the sleep pressure to release the melatonin. Now, sometimes people will take melatonin to push them into sleep. I want to say right here that in some countries you cannot buy melatonin over the counter because it is a hormone, and being aware of melatonin and what it does is very key. So I'm not suggesting that people need to run out and go buy melatonin, but being aware of what helps produce melatonin, what creates melatonin in your body, and one of those things is that S pressure is key. Which gland releases melatonin? The pons, the pituitary, the hypothalamus, or the pineal gland? And it's the pineal gland. Okay, so in case you didn't get that, it was the pineal gland. Which of the gland helps with immobilization? Pituitary, pons, hypothalamus, or pineal gland? Which one? If you said pons, you were correct. I want to talk about caffeine. Why do caffeinated drinks keep me awake? Now, some of you will say caffeinated drinks don't keep me awake. Well, you might not think it does, but biologically, it is impacting your S drive. So think about this way. Caffeine promotes alertness by blocking adenosine, a neurotransmitter in your brain. You need adenosine to build up in your system so that you can get that S drive building up, so you can get that sleep pressure. Remember that graph that I showed you earlier where it was going up and then the pressure was building and then it drops. You want it building in your body throughout the day. When you drink caffeine, it inhibits that buildup. Now, the other thing about caffeine is that you need at least 6 hours to process half the caffeine you drink, and another 6 hours to process half of what remains, and so on. So if I decided to drink a really caffeinated drink at 3 o'clock, I would need at least 12 hours to get it completely out of my system. And yes, it does impact your sleep. I want you to be very aware of caffeinated drinks doing that. So if you're struggling with going to sleep and you're having problems with it, be very aware of when you drink caffeine. Even if you feel like it's not keeping you awake, it is, by not letting you build up that S drive, that S pressure that I was talking about. A represents the adenosine, and then C represents the caffeine. You want the adenosine to build up in the system so you can push your sleep drive and then get the melatonin released. caffeine inhibits that uptake. Does that make sense? See that? So these are your neurotransmitters here. And no, it's not like what a neurotransmitter looks like per se, but you get the idea of it just plugging in. You want A to plug in because it builds up that sleep pressure. So now you've fallen asleep. And what's really key is that relaxation is key to falling asleep. You have to be relaxed. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But you've fallen asleep successfully and you move into something that's called non-REM. This is not rapid eye movement. But this is where you start to fall asleep into different stages. You deep wave, you're falling, you're moving into different slow waves, and then you move into rapid eye movement. This is key. This is paramount because, believe it or not, non-REM is restorative. It flushes out areas. It's your body temperature and your energy it uses to decline, and it's dulled. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about temperature in your room, but you need your temperature not to be very hot in your room. You need to let your body actually start to shut down in a sense of slowing down your brain waves, your heart rate, breathing slow. And this is key that if you're amped up and you're feeling really hyper, it's important to actually start to slow your breath down. That can actually start to guide your body into this. And then while your digestive process speeds up. There are 4 distinct stages of non-REM sleep, and they have patterns. And the key is to move through each one of these patterns. And relaxing is key. Now, REM sleep is energizing. And this is where it hardwires neural pathways, those neurons in your brain. And this is where it starts to electronically send those pulses. And it's where dreams takes place. It's important for you to do this because it starts to clear out and recategorize and start to rewire certain parts of your body, if you can think of it that way. Most muscles are paralyzed except for the respiratory muscles and the teeny muscles in your eyes. Since your brain, and this is from Matthew Walker, Why We Sleep, Unlock the Power of Sleep and Dreams. Since your brain desires most of its REM sleep in the last part of the night, which is to say the late morning, you will lose 60 to 90% of all your REM sleep, even though you're losing 25% of your total sleep time. So if you decide, what that means is if you decide to wake up really early, let's say at 4 a.m., and you haven't gone through your REM sleep and the last part, you might not feel like you slept. You might feel like you're really dragging the next day. So it's really important to naturally wake up and I would say alarm clocks, you got to be careful about using them. You need to be thinking about those morning hours are really priceless. And it's key to pay attention to them. All right. Next part is the different types of chronotypes. And these are pretty much different types of sleepers. And this is something I pulled from the Sleep Foundation. 15% of people are line chronotypes. These are people who like to wake up early. They're morning people. They wake up naturally at 5 a.m. They like to go to bed around 9. They're most productive in the morning. Then we have some bear types, and these people wake up at 7 a.m. They like to go to bed around 11, and they're most productive between 10 a.m. and 2. Wolf types are creative thinkers. They are most productive in the afternoon and like to go to bed late. And so you can see 9 a.m., 12 a.m. And then dolphins are sensitive sleepers with fragmented sleep patterns and rarely keep a regular sleep pattern. So they could wake up at 6 a.m., bedtime 11, and they're most productive in the late afternoon. So how much sleep do you really need? And I showed that chart in the beginning. Most adults need 7 to 8 hours, and they have a lower risk of mortality than those who sleep fewer than 7 or more than 8 hours. If you don't get 8 hours of sleep, a sleep debt is created. So what that means is that you start to get this feeling of inertia, sleep inertia, is that you start to feel groggy and cognitively impaired and a disorientated feeling. Right now, sleep disorders are more common than you think. There are more than 80 different types of clinical sleeping disorders, and it's estimated that between 50 and to 70 million people suffer from one. There's something called sleep apnea, and then this is a disorder in which breathing is briefly and repeatedly interrupted during sleep. It affects more than 18 million Americans, and 1 in every 15 people may have this. There are 2 types of major sleep apnea. There's central sleep apnea, where the brain fails to tell the respiratory muscles to initiate breathing. And then contributors include alcohol, certain illegal drugs, and certain medications. It can trigger this. Or obstructive sleep apnea. This occurs when air cannot move in and out of the person's nose or mouth, even though the body tries to breathe. And this can be contributed by overweight and other factors like tonsils or, someone's throat being swollen. But there can be, or congestion. There's a lot of different things that can be contributing to that. And if you're not sleeping well, the most commonly prescribed therapy is an actual machine that forces air into the nose to keep the airway open. And there's also dental appliances and lifestyle changes. And then what if you're also not sleeping well? There's something called restless leg syndrome. And this has a lot to do by unpleasant sensations in the legs. They can be basically there's not enough blood going to the legs, and it creates this restlessness or stimulation is happening. And this could be from the use of medication. You could decrease tobacco and alcohol use. You can apply heat to the legs, and then there's relaxation and stretching techniques. And then there's something called narcolepsy, which is an actual neurologic disorder caused by the brain that its inability to really regulate the sleep-wake cycle. So a person can just drop into sleep just suddenly. So how to sleep and really cool down? One important thing is that the core temperature needs to go down to 65 degrees. And, even though, a hot bath, it seems like you're warming it up, but actually when you do a hot bath, it can help you fall asleep more quickly. What it's doing is it's actually dilating the blood vessels on the surface, and then it's radiating inner heat, and it's your core body temperature starts to plummet. Consequently, you fall asleep more quickly because your cold is colder. And hot baths prior to bed can also induce 10 to 15% more deep non-REM sleep for healthy adults. So for all those people who are taking a hot bath before you go to sleep, here's some research to support your hot bath. The other thing I could really stress is that your feet and hands need to warm up or cool off. So if you're not getting that reducing the temperature in your core, right? And your feet are really, really hot, and your hands are hot. This is where it's important to kick the sheets and get the feet out, get the hands out. Or if your hands are cold or your feet are cold, it's important to move them inside of the sheets. Yes, that little simple trick can help you fall asleep. Again, you need to have a good 65-degree temperature in the house, in your room, and then you need to make sure that your feet and hands are either comfortable in a good place. You do not want to be too warm. In that case, kick them out. You do not want to be cold. You need to bring them in. So technology is also the culprit of keeping you to sleep. The light receptors in the eye that communicate daytime are more sensitive to short wave. So that means that that blue light that your iPad is producing or your iPhone are producing are twice as harmful on nighttime melatonin. And it's really key to move to warm yellow light and move that to that type of light at night. I also want to talk about alcohol. Alcohol wrecks REM sleep. Alcohol is one of the most significant suppressors of REM sleep. It is key. Although it's a central nervous system depressant, it slows down the prefrontal cortex, but it does not let you go into REM sleep. So when not getting REM, the reason why alcoholics will overload and try to get it back is they will go into something called DTs, detoxification tremors, where they start to shake because their body is craving because they're not getting this REM sleep. This is one of the reasons that can produce DTs. So it's really important that if someone says, oh, I'll just have a glass or two of wine before they go to sleep, it actually can be very prohibitive in getting good REM sleep. Sleeping pills. Also, Ambien-induced sleep, however, not only failed to match these benefits, I'm taking this direct from Why We Sleep, despite the animal sleeping just as long, but caused a 50% weakening of the unwiring of the brain cell connections that formed learning. And in doing so, Ambien-laced sleep actually creates a memory eraser and cognitive fog rather than engraving it, right? Now I put the cognitive fog in there. Ambien-laced sleep became a memory eraser rather than an engraver. So really be careful if someone's taking Ambien to induce their sleep. It can be problematic. And I also need to put a cautionary tale that Ambien can be very much addictive. So be very cautious with the use of Ambien. So naps are good before 3 p.m. Naps after 12 p.m. to 3 p.m. are good. But if you start to do naps after 3 p.m., you might have some problems getting into your sleep pattern. So takeaways from this. Sleep hygiene is important. You do need to have a good sleep pattern. Can you think of 3 things to help improve your sleep pattern? Reflect on that. From the temperature of your room to what you consume before you go to sleep, how relaxed you are before you go to sleep. This is key. And this is something I'm going to talk about in another area, is using hypnosis to push yourself into sleep, using relaxation, taking a hot bath. All these things can help relax you as you start to move into sleep. And what you consume, whether it's alcohol, caffeine, all these different things can actually impede your ability to go to sleep. And finally, REM sleep is important. These are some of the things I hope you took away from these, but maybe you got some other things from this presentation. Try to think of 3 things to help improve your sleep pattern, because your sleep is important.